80% of those that had been left behind had died.
It began with a coffin buried beneath the altar of a ruined church. A nobleman, a silk sash, a soldier's honor. For 400 years, his story slept in the soil until science dared to wake it. Because when archaeologists opened that coffin, what they found didn't confirm a legend. It erased one. The remains belonged to a man celebrated as kin to the governor of Jamestown, the first English settlement in North America. But when researchers sequenced fragments of his DNA, it told a story his family never meant anyone to hear, one that crossed oceans, stained noble bloodlines, and was hidden for centuries behind polished genealogies. The revelation didn't just change Jamestown's history, it changed our understanding of how science can resurrect truth from silence. And the question that still lingers is this: whose secret was buried so deep? It took 4 centuries of rot, ruin, and genetic code to reveal it. The year is 2013. Beneath the cracked foundations of Jamestown's earliest church, archaeologists from the Jamestown Rediscovery Project uncovered 4 graves, each precisely aligned beneath the chancel, the holiest ground of the colony. These were not common burials. Only the elite, men of title, power, and divine favor, were laid to rest so close to the altar. Inside one coffin, fragments of a silver-threaded military sash shimmered faintly under the light. In another, traces of a wooden coffin still bore the marks of ceremonial care. And among them, 2 skeletons stood out: Sir Ferdinando Wenman, a knight of England, and Captain William West, the governor's celebrated kinsman. For centuries, history recorded them as cousins through the noble West family line. But when scientists at the Smithsonian and the Rediscovery Lab extracted their DNA, a different lineage emerged. Over 13,000 genetic fragments were sequenced from each man's teeth and femur, the densest bones, the last to decay. Less than 1% of those fragments were human, but that fraction was enough. Both men carried identical mitochondrial DNA sequences, a perfect maternal match that could only come from the same female ancestor. That discovery didn't just solve a mystery, it exposed one. Because the West family archives had no record of a shared maternal line. If these men were kinsmen, their connection had been erased, and for good reason. The truth, as science would reveal, was never meant to be found. Before we dig deeper into the scandal that rewrote Jamestown's history, and subscribe to Root and Relic. Here, every layer of soil hides a story, and every story hides a truth that refuses to stay buried. Jamestown was never just an archaeological site. It was a time capsule, and in many ways, a crime scene. Since 1994, the Jamestown Rediscovery Project, led by Dr. William Kelso and the Smithsonian's forensic anthropologist, Dr. Douglas Owsley, has uncovered over 2 million artifacts. Fragments of pottery, rusted sword hilts, cannonballs, animal bones, even butchered horse remains from the desperate starving time. But beneath the church floor lay the colony's truest relics, its dead. The graves were fragile, shallow, and centuries old. Yet within them lay something no one expected: survivable DNA. In the climate-controlled labs of the Smithsonian, samples from femurs and teeth were ground into fine powder under sterile, filtered air. Ancient DNA extraction is brutal work. Time and humidity shred genetic material into fragments a few dozen base pairs long. But within those fragments lie the oldest voices of human identity. Researchers recovered more than 13,000 DNA fragments per individual, verifying sequences through next-generation analysis and contamination screening under 0.7%. When they compared those results, 2 profiles aligned in perfect maternal symmetry. The data were as conclusive as fingerprints. The combination of ancient DNA and isotopic analysis turned Jamestown from an excavation into a living laboratory. Isotopic ratios in oxygen and strontium within the men's tooth enamel revealed where they grew up, far from the Chesapeake. The readings pointed to the limestone belt of southern England, most likely Oxfordshire. These weren't colonists of the soil. They were emissaries of empire. Imported men, bred for authority, sent to shape a new world in their image. But the bones they left behind would one day challenge the very legitimacy of that image. To understand the men buried beneath Jamestown's church, you have to return to the world they came from. By 1607, England was starving for power. Spain had claimed the silver of the Andes and the sugar of the Caribbean. Portugal ruled the seas. England ruled nothing but ambition. The Virginia Company of London promised salvation through colonization, a chance to plant the English flag in the New World and secure both profit and prestige. But the reality that awaited was filth, fever, and famine. Jamestown rose on a mosquito-ridden peninsula chosen for defense, not survival. Brackish river water bred dysentery. Mosquitoes spread malaria. Food rotted before it could be eaten. Between 1607 and 1625, roughly 7,300 settlers arrived. By 1625, barely 1,200 were still alive. The rest, more than 80%, had perished. During the winter of 1609 to 1610, the starving time, colonists ate rats, snakes, shoe leather, and each other. In 2012, Smithsonian forensic scientists confirmed cut marks on a teenage girl's skull consistent with survival cannibalism, the earliest proof of the practice in an English colony. And yet, even in starvation, hierarchy endured. Ordinary settlers were buried in shallow, unmarked graves outside the fort. But beneath the church chancel, 4 coffins, crafted with care, aligned east to west, belonged to the privileged few. Isotope readings from their tooth enamel revealed oxygen and strontium ratios matching southern England's limestone belt, especially Oxfordshire. They were imported men of rank. English gentry transplanted whole into a hostile land. In death, as in life, class decided where their bones would rest. Before we move on, if you were unearthing Jamestown's graves, what would you want to find first? How they died, or what their DNA refused to forget? Tell me in the comments below. Inside the sterile clean rooms of the Smithsonian, technicians worked under filtered air, sealed gloves, and ultraviolet light, every movement designed to avoid contamination. From each skeleton, they recovered over 13,000 fragments of ancient DNA, most less than 100 base pairs long. Only 0.7% of the material was human, but that sliver was enough to read the signatures of identity. When the sequences were compared, 2 profiles aligned perfectly. Captain William West, the governor's proud kinsman. Sir Ferdinando Wenman, England's first knight buried on American soil. Their mitochondrial DNA, passed only from mother to child, was identical across more than 12,800 reads. Not similar. Not statistically close. Identical. An alignment with a probability of random match lower than 1 in 10 million. It meant one thing. They shared the same maternal ancestor, perhaps a mother or grandmother. But the West family archives told a different story. Both men were supposed to be related through the male line. If that were true, the DNA match was impossible. The contradiction sent historians back into England's archives, sifting through wills and parish records until a name surfaced. Elizabeth West, the unmarried sister of Governor Thomas West. Lord de la Warr. If William was her son, his noble title masked an illegitimate birth, a family secret buried for 4 centuries. For the Wests, it was more than scandal. It was erasure. One that survived until science forced it into the light. A few milligrams of bone powder had rewritten the genealogy of an empire. In 17th century England, illegitimacy was more than moral shame. It was legal exile. An unwed mother of noble blood risked losing dowry, inheritance, and reputation. For the Wests, a family balanced between wealth and royal favor, such a stain could collapse their standing overnight. Elizabeth West appears in records like a ghost, never named outright, yet always near the governor's orbit. Letters, wills, and court notes, place her close to William West, but never acknowledge the bond. The mitochondrial DNA made that silence impossible to maintain. Across every sample, the sequences aligned perfectly. Each cytosine, each adenine, a genetic confession 4 centuries late. To protect their name, the Wests rewrote reality. William was baptized discreetly, raised as a gentleman, granted a commission, and shipped to Virginia under the safer title of kinsman. Distance became their disguise. Even across an ocean, the family secret followed him, sealed in his bones, buried beneath the church floor. This case, verified through both genetic and archival evidence, became the first documented instance of illegitimacy proven by ancient DNA in early colonial America. It showed that the colony built on conquest and faith was also built on denial. If one strand of DNA can rewrite 400 years of noble history, what other secrets might still be sleeping beneath royal tombs, Viking graves, or colonial cemeteries? Tell us in the comments, what buried truth would you want science to uncover next? The Jamestown DNA scandal isn't just a family drama. It's a reflection of the world that built America. Within a decade of those burials, the colony began drafting the first laws defining inheritance, race, and legitimacy. Who could own land? Who could marry whom? And which children were worthy of names and estates? William West's hidden birth wasn't an exception. It was a symptom. The same society that erased a nobleman's illegitimacy would soon construct a racial hierarchy to enforce its purity by law. Lineage became the weapon of empire. The irony is chilling. A settlement founded in pursuit of freedom was already enslaved to ancestry. The graves beneath Jamestown's church were not only the resting places of the colony's elite, they were monuments to England's fear of imperfection. Now, 4 centuries later, those same bones reveal what those men could not admit: that human history is less about bloodlines than about the lies we build to protect them. What began in Jamestown has become the blueprint for a new kind of archaeology, one where history is tested in the lab as much as in the field. After sequencing over 13,000 DNA fragments from the church burials, scientists paired genetics with isotopic and environmental DNA analysis to reconstruct entire lives from chemical signatures. Strontium and oxygen isotopes in tooth enamel traced their childhoods to southern England's chalk and limestone soils, matching Oxfordshire's geological fingerprint. Carbon and nitrogen ratios hinted at diets rich in preserved meat and cereal grains, confirming the English gentry's distinct menu even across the Atlantic. But the frontier is shifting again. At the Jamestown Rediscovery and Smithsonian Labs, researchers are now extracting environmental DNA, eDNA, microscopic genetic material trapped in the soil itself. Every gram of dirt can reveal fragments of human DNA, traces of plants once cultivated, and even the pathogens that haunted the colony. Early tests have already detected sequences related to Plasmodium vivax, the parasite that causes malaria, and soil-borne bacteria linked to typhoid and dysentery. In effect, scientists are beginning to map not just who died at Jamestown, but what killed them. This is history reconstructed, molecule by molecule, where the silent chemistry of soil becomes a living witness. And like every witness, it refuses to stay quiet. The Jamestown discovery is part of a larger revolution in how we confront the past. Around the world, DNA has begun to dismantle myths once protected by prestige and power. In 2014, researchers at the University of Leicester discovered that the Y chromosome of King Richard III didn't match his supposed descendants, proving a hidden break in the royal bloodline that ruled England for generations. In 2017, analysis of a 1,000-year-old grave in Birka, Sweden, revealed that a Viking warrior long celebrated as male was, in fact, a woman buried with 2 horses and a full arsenal. a discovery that forced historians to rethink everything they thought they knew about gender and power in the Viking Age. And in Egypt, the genomic mapping of royal mummies has shown that dynasties once believed ethnically pure were instead woven with ancestry from Nubia, Anatolia, and the Near East. Each of these cases shares one truth: DNA is the ultimate historian. It carries no bias, no agenda, only memory. Now Jamestown joins that global chorus. Its secret, buried beneath a church floor, stands beside Richard III's broken lineage, the Viking warriors' rediscovered identity, and the pharaoh's blended blood. Together they remind us that history's greatest strength is not perfection, it's correction. Science does not humiliate the past. It redeems it, one genome at a time. Four centuries after the first English settlers stepped onto Virginia soil, their bones are still talking, and their story is not the one carved in stone or taught in classrooms. They came chasing immortality through empire, but it is their mortality, their fragmented DNA, their isotope signatures, their silent chemistry, that finally tells the truth. From fewer than 13,000 genetic fragments, less than 1% human, scientists rebuilt an ancestral link that official records erased. From the ratios of oxygen and strontium in their tooth enamel, they traced childhoods to England's chalk hills. From nitrogen and carbon isotopes, they reconstructed diets rich in salted meats and barley gruel, the fare of a privileged but fragile gentry. Each layer of evidence converged on one reality. Beneath Jamestown's altar lay not heroes of legend, but human beings, shaped by ambition, fear, and fragile reputation. The West family secret, buried under centuries of ceremony, had become a mirror for all of us. It proved that civilization's foundations are rarely neat or noble. They are layered in compromise and myth, in the fictions people tell to keep their names clean. William West was meant to be forgotten, but a single strand of his mitochondrial DNA outlived every document, every prayer, every lie that tried to silence it. And from that fragment, a new kind of history was born. One written not by victors, but by evidence, because the soil doesn't lie, and neither does the code that endures within it. The graves beneath Jamestown's church remind us that history is not a static record. It's a living pulse. Every century it slows, but it never stops. And when science listens closely enough, even the dead begin to whisper again. William West's secret survived 400 years because ink can be erased and parchment can rot. But the body remembers what the mind denies. Bone keeps score. DNA keeps truth. What began as a colonial experiment became a mirror for empire itself. An experiment in how far humanity will go to protect a name, to hide a bloodline, to edit reality into something worthy of remembrance. And yet, in the end, it wasn't a priest or a nobleman who told the truth. It was a molecule, silent, incorruptible, eternal. From Richard III's broken lineage to the Viking warriors' rediscovered identity. From the pharaoh's blended ancestry to the secrets beneath Jamestown's altar, one pattern holds. Science redeems what history conceals. As researchers push deeper into Viking crypts, royal tombs, and forgotten plague pits, remember this: every shovel of dirt unearths not just bones, but choices. Every strand of DNA is a confession waiting to be read. At Root and Relic, we tell the stories that refuse to stay buried. If this journey through bloodlines and buried truth changed how you see the past, subscribe to Root and Relic, and join us as we keep digging, through relics and roots alike, toward the truths that still breathe beneath our feet. Because beneath every relic lies a root. And beneath every root, a truth that refuses to die.